Hello.
Awesome. Hi. So, how's your day been?
How's my what?
How's your day been?
Pretty good. I had a flat tire on my bicycle, and I had to fix that.
That doesn't sound very good.
That's all right. I noticed it before, it was like one of those things where I noticed it before I got on the bike to ride home, so I'm happy enough.
That's good.
Yeah, that's a good
Yeah,
thing.
so I was like, all right. And then I'm actually at Discord House where I have tire repair, capabilities. So all worked out pretty damn good, if you ask me.
Awesome.
Great.
And I've just been working away on, I've had a few long phone calls, but mostly have been working away on various projects and getting ready to go upstairs and try to finish up some more work on this endless Fugazi Live Series website project, which is...
Oh, is that the archive?
Yeah, which is just the most giant, insane project I think I've ever been involved with. So just way more... I think the idea is there, but mastering and editing and getting all the associated ephemera organized for 1,000 shows is just, it's insane.
Sounds like it.
But I think that, when it's all up, it's gonna take on it's gonna be a really interesting. I wish I could call it a document because it's not a document. It's going to be a really interesting entity. I don't know. What do you call a website? What the hell is a website? This is the thing I've thought about. I had this moment a few months ago where maybe it was a year ago, but I've been working on this for 3 years. At some point I woke up and I thought, my God, I can't hold this thing in my hand. This doesn't exist. It's not a book. It's just like this totally, it's an illusion almost, a website.
Yeah, like an idea, like credit or something.
Right, and you can't really, it's not exactly a resource. I mean, it is a resource, but it's not a dependable one anyway, because it's so, it's not only obviously dependent on electricity, but it's also dependent on platform.
Right.
And, this is, essentially it's a fairly traditional, it's a website, but one has to assume that there will come a time where you would have to have a really specific device to actually look at a website. It's already getting there, I reckon, and so that means it would have to be, a book is a book is a book. And no matter what format or like technology you're involved with, a book is basically a book. I guess now there's digital books, but but the website thing is so dependent on the actual platform that should there be developed a new way of looking at things, which, and I guess apps already to some degree are that, and one assumes there'll be extensions of that sort of thing, that we'll have to then figure out how to translate or convert this enormous, 11 or 1,200 page, for lack of a better word, website, and how that will work, I just don't know. It's a challenge. Yeah, I like to think that. I have to say that the site itself. Part of the reason that we or I really the reason we started working on this thing, the reason that it became kind of like a mission was, it just seemed insane to have this, closet just filled with cassette and DATs and CDs, these recordings of these live shows that no one was listening to. I certainly don't listen to them. Why would I? It's just crazy. I'm not going to sit there and listen to Fugazi shows.
Right.
So why do we make them? What was the point? And I have to believe, I'm quite certain about this, that all over this country and probably throughout the world, there are people, usually men, in their 40s and 50s and 60s, sitting on these vast collections of archival recordings or other materials that have actually are a documentation of culture. And they own them. They don't listen to them. They just own them. At some point, they die, and then the family, someone inherits them. They usually just throw them away, or they just don't. It just seems crazy to me, that this stuff. If it's there, you might as well share it. So the idea was just to try to make it available, and then of course once we could have just put we just could digitize every one of those things, which we did easily. Well, not easily. It took us 9 months or a year to digitize them all, but then we could have just posted just those things. But it just seemed really sad to just stick them up with no context. So then we thought, okay, well, we'll actually organize a site. We'll have a page for every show. They'll have, if there's photos or post flyers or whatever, any kind of ephemera, we'll put it up there. We'll have, I actually kept a list of the gigs we did. I knew how much the door was and how many people were there. So it just seemed like a way to put it all and put it up there for whatever purpose. And, I have to, it's interesting because we put up about 250 shows already. And I've been really struck by the fact that there's a handful that there hasn't been a single download. And it just makes me, I was like, oh, God, you would have thought someone would have been interested,
Yeah.
So at least one person.
It'll happen, you just got to give it some time.
But there's other ones that have, hundreds or, whatever, which is, so I guess it balances out. But still, I think that my tendencies, I'm more interested in the more kind of weird shows as opposed to the obvious ones.
Right.
What would be a weird one? Like
Lord in Prison would be a weird one, playing in a prison, or
I saw a video of that.
Yeah, that's in our movie.
Yeah, that was where I saw it.
Right.
That was really cool.
That would be one, or maybe shows, and like there's some shows we left notes about, like the kind of odd aspects of the venue, or maybe like a small town like Itobari in Brazil, playing this tiny little town, in this essentially sort of like converted barn. But you think it'd be really interesting to see where the band goes with that. But we'll see. But anyway, as I've noted, I think that once it's all up there, then it'll make sense. It'll make more sense than it does now, even.
I'm sure you get this question a lot, but once it's all up there, have you guys thought of maybe one finale-esque show going out to put on there?
No.
All right.
I mean, that would be a really absurd reason to play a show, I think.
Well, could be marketing tactic of some sort.
As I said, an absurd reason. I mean, a marketing tactic is pretty much, would be, I think, when it comes to Fugazi, a deeply absurd concept.
Yeah. Well, you said you like the weird shows.
I think the word marketing would just, when you try to put that into our equation, it just doesn't make any sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The four of us, I actually have I've been in touch with all four. I mean, we talk to each other all the time, and I've spoken to the other three today, actually. And, we're very much in the band. We just don't play shows. And we don't record. But I think the four of us are forever connected, no matter what. We really are a very close family, and I think we think of each other as band members still. Whether or not we ever play a show, I don't know. We retain the right to play or not play. We'll see. But in terms of this is a separate project, and I think that if Fugazi wants to play a show, we don't need a device like we finished the website. Here's a show. Like we want to play. We're just going to play. And if we don't want to play, then we won't.
Fair enough. So on Discord Records, you guys just put out the Rites of Spring demos just this last month, right?
Yeah, it just came out last week. Yeah.
Yeah. I was just curious about if you wanted to talk on that project a little bit, because I know I ordered my copy and it's on the way, but just a little interested in it.
Well, Rites of Spring, of course, was an enormously important band here in Washington. Certainly enormously important in my life. And I knew all the people in the band, and two of them, of course, were Brennan and Guy, who ended up in Fugazi. In 1980, late 83, 84, there was a kind of a meltdown in this sort of our scene here in Washington, like at least our corner of it, because it had started, the scene had gotten bigger and bigger, and so like sort of the Discord crew, for lack of a better term, that it was sort of like things like Minor Threat had broken up and Faith had broken up, and Insurrection, which was a band that Guy and Brendan were in, they had broken up. And I think we spent that sort of winter kind of pondering what we're all going to do. And when I say we all, I mean, probably 15 or 20, maybe 30 people that sort of kind of a clique of sorts, whatever, but just sort of the people that we felt like a real connection with, and figuring like, well, because the scene here had gotten so repugnant, really was these a lot of really stupid skinhead kids, just really violent, and just just didn't feel like a very healthy environment at that point. And it was decided that we weren't going to retire or whatever the people do at that moment, but that we would just go ahead and make a new scene. Like we would just make new music that would be perhaps not to the liking of the people who just wanted to fight, but would be our music, and we would just carry on. And Right to Spring were really the first band. They worked their way through the winter, and in the spring of '84 they were really starting to develop. But then the bass player, Mike Fellows, got an opportunity to go out to California. He had a relative who was involved with a job for the 1984 Summer Olympics in Los Angeles. It was blowing up balloons for balloon displays or something like that. So he just announced out of the blue that he's moving to Los Angeles. And that was into the band, and everyone was pretty devastated. Like, the people in the band were really sad. And so it was decided that we would just go record, just to document the work they had done thus far. They had never played a single show. So in April of '84, just a couple days before Mike left, we went to the studio and just tracked everything they had. Guy was the guitar player and singer in the band, but actually no one had ever heard him sing before, because they didn't have a PA in practice, and he never sang in practice. So his vocals on there were totally mind-blowing, just how intense his vocals were. Like, nobody knew what to expect, and then it was just so heavy. And it was also really, I think, attended by, everybody was sad. It was sad that the band wasn't going to be a band. So we did the tape, and Mike went off to California. Then we finished the recording and made a mix, which we sent to Mike. When you hear it, there's I don't want to be a spoiler alert, but there's a thing that can message to Mike. There's like a sort of an affectionate message on there. But in any event, Mike came back in June, and they started playing in July of 1980, right? That month, July '84, and they were really I think they were ahead of their time, certainly, but they inspired so many people in this town, and really their shows were they're a great live band, phenomenal live band, and their album came out, I guess it was the next year it came out. So this demo just kind of bounced around, because it was obviously some of the same songs that ended up on the album, and didn't make any sense to put it out. They broke up about a year after that, and then the tape just sort of got deep sixed, and I think it was like people had cassettes of it, and it was traded around, but just sort of was out there. And The Void, and about 5 or 6 years ago, I've always loved this demo, and I had approached the band about putting it out, but their position was like, what's the point? And this time around, I think that we talked about it again. I said, listen, people like your band. It's and a really interesting document. And we're not forcing anybody to buy it. We're just thought it'd be nice to make it available because already, you can find it online. So you might as well. This is an opportunity to make, get to really, take the master tapes and really do something that would honor the music and they were like, yeah, let's do it. So it worked out really well. Mike Fellows actually was sort of he led the charge. He did the art, the design, and everything of it. So, and we did a 10-inch and a CD of it, and it'll of course be also available on various downloadable websites, I reckon. So.
Yeah, that's great. Actually, that leads into another quick question I had. Discord, of course, puts out new material relatively regularly, but I was just, you guys also do a lot of archiving. I mean, the Fugazi website you're just talking about, and the Rites of Spring demo re-release. I just wanted to hear a little bit about your philosophy on Discord Records and why you put out what you put out and where's the healthy balance with that.
Well, as a label, our mission from the very beginning was to document music coming out of a particular community here in Washington, D.C. And for quite a while, that sort of community was being productive. There was a lot of music coming out, a lot of new bands. Mm-hmm. I had always thought that the label would come to an end when people sort of stopped being the original crew. People stopped being in band, but inevitably, younger siblings started coming into bands, and then friends had people would. It just kept going, and then at some point, actually started. There was people were coming. These bands were forming, and there were people who grew up listening to Discord. So that idea of I'm not I don't know what I had thought about when I said the community to begin with, but I think that certainly counts as community when you have actual children who are listening to Minor Threat when they were 6 and now they're 20 and they're and they're in bands. So we just kept documenting stuff that was happening, but at some point it definitely settled down here, and so there's not that many new releases anymore. And I feel like we've entered a bit of an era now where I think we are in we have a custodial responsibility. What I mean by that is that for the past 32 years since we started the label, people in these bands have entrusted us with their music. Keep in mind, we've never had a single contract. There's no lawyers, no managers, nothing. This is a straight trust arrangement, and they have trusted us. And every 6 months, we write royalty checks to everybody. They're not huge, but they reflect, the share of the royalties, and it's a real accounting. And we still pay everybody every time a record goes into profit. We split it with the band, and we pay the checks, and we send them the money. Now I feel like, where we are now is that these people who have entrusted us with their music, we now have a responsibility to make that music available to anybody in the world who wants to hear it, basically, as long as there's an interest. If there's an interest, if people are curious, if you're curious about the Rites of Spring 10-inch or the demo recording, then I feel like that's part of the deal now, is that I have a responsibility to make it available, because the band has, that was recorded in 1984, and I've had the tapes ever since. And I feel like if there is an interest, then now I owe it to the band to make sure that I make it available in a way that is not disgusting. Try to make to honor this music, which I think is important, or I think it's important music. Whether or not anybody else does, it doesn't make any difference to me. I think it's important, and it was important to me. So as long as it can make sense, I guess I just keep on doing it. So the philosophy now is, as it always has been, is just to try to respond to circumstances in life as they are, circumstances in the world as they are. And I feel like there's a logic to it all, like the sense that by putting this stuff out, it gives people who are interested, and especially younger people, it gives them some indication that they can create something and it can be real, because these are kids who did. You follow?
Yes.
I mean, I was 18 years old when we started the label. I'm 50. And a lot of the people in the band were like 15 or 16. We were told from the beginning by older people and other peers that we were too idealistic, and that we were not being realistic, and that it was crazy to do stuff without contracts, and it wasn't going to work that way, and I feel like those people were wrong. And I guess I feel like that just continuing to do this work underscores that over and over and over. And I hope that then, in turn, it will inspire other people who are being told they can't do something to go ahead and do it because it's right for them.
When did you sort of realize that your music and your whole scene in the 80s with Minor Threat and all the related bands was sort of like transcending the region and the state and the generations?
Well, that came at different times. I mean, very beginning, of course, I've told people this many times that when I wrote lyrics for Minor Threat, it never in my wildest dreams occurred to me that it would be lyrics that people in other cities would listen to. I was singing to 20 people. I was mostly singing to my high school friends, It just didn't occur to me that we would, especially in the very beginning, it just didn't occur to me that those lyrics would really get outside of the Washington, like out of the 930 Club or whatever, whoever we were playing. It just didn't occur to me that beyond the DC punk scene, that anybody would ever hear it. And obviously we made records, so I knew that we were documenting it. In 1982, Minor Threat we played our first show in December of 1980. And then in the August or September of 81, our guitar player, Lyle Pressler, went to college. He went to Northwestern in Chicago. And we broke up. Around Christmas time, the Bad Brains had just come in from a tour, and they'd just come back from the West Coast, and HR said, what's going on with Minor Threat? So we broke up. He said, man, you got to get back together because you got to go play in California. I was like, why? He says, because you said something. Now people want to know more. You got to go out there. You can't just start a conversation and walk out on it. And I think that was the first time it occurred to me that there was a really serious external interest. And it just so happened that Lyle did not like college, and he was very miserable about it. And Brian was very eager to get back to work. So in Easter of '82, we got back together. And then I think but then it just over the years, it's been kind of slowly developing. So I don't really notice, when you use a term like transcend, I just don't ever think about it. I just think about the work that's in front of me. Now, occasionally, something will come up and I go, wow, that's weird. I guess, that's interesting that this showed up somewhere. There's a Minor Threat reference in some
Nike thing.
Well, yeah, whatever, But I have to say that even though those things can be they can be freaky or discouraging, there's also something kind of amazing about it. And what's amazing about it is that every time a song like a Minor Threat song, for instance, pops up in a weird place, for me, it's proof that the corporations haven't managed to sew it all up. Because we definitely, like I said, we're definitely not a part of a corporation. We don't have any press agent. We certainly don't play songs. We don't, we own all of our own music. There's no publishing company involved. So if a Minor Threat song shows up somewhere, or a Minor Threat graphic shows up somewhere, it's because somehow, we were managed to pop up on the surface of culture without it being an artificial sort of thing. No one paid to get it there. It was not placed. it meant that it's actually possible for the underground, for some just to be real. And that's encouraging for me to think about in this culture, that people, that pieces of work can just exist because people like them or they mean something to them, as opposed to everything being positioned or carefully plugged or, and so I think it's always kind of strangely encouraging, even though it's, like in the case of a couple of things, it's a little abusive. It's not the right thing to do. But even with that Nike thing, that was a bit of that's really kind of a tempest in a teapot, honestly. It was just a flyer, but it turned into something, because the internet is like the loudest trumpet in the world or something. But I guess there's moments like that, like, wow, I guess that's a really, it's a big deal. And that is interesting to me. It's interesting when that happens. But I don't usually think about it because I'm busy fixing flat tires and, sorting out tapes and so forth. And I just do my work. It doesn't do me any good to think about how famous I am. Just what's the point of that?
Right, 'cause that was never your intention.
Yeah, but I mean, if it was, what's the value of it? Like, what's the point? What do you get out of it? What's it worth? Can you put that? You can't hold that in your hand either. It's just a thing. And also, the thing about being a known person or famous, if you want to use that word, is that has more to do with the people who are thinking about you. Much less to do with me. That relationship mostly exists in other people's minds. And I can tell you, because usually the people meet me, they don't know what to say. Because they don't really know me. The person they know is their interpretation of me, which is themselves.
How often do people, going off of that, how often do people recognize you, when you're writing?
Depends where I am.
Yeah.
In Washington, D.C., not very often.
Really?
Because in Washington, D.C., it's a government town, and I think that part of the reason I think I've always been, I'm just me. I just go my business. But if I go to other places like California or New York, something, I think people will recognize me, and I don't know. It just depends. Depends where I am. Sometimes, frequently. Sometimes, occasionally. It depends. I mean, obviously, if I go to a health food store, usually someone's going to recognize me. There's always some punk rockers at a health food joint. They always recognize me.
Well, what is that interaction usually like? They just don't know what to say.
Hey, man. Hey, how you doing? I don't know. I mean, it depends. I mean, people often thank me. They thanks so much for your music, and I say, on behalf of music, I will accept your thanks. But it's perfectly nice. I'm always happy to say hello to people. I don't mind. Occasionally, things get a little out of line. I mean, I can remember. This is a really particular story, but it's true. Fugazi was playing a show in Florida. I think it was in Orlando, and we had done our sound check, and we were going to eat dinner at a Chinese restaurant just down the street from the club. And there were people milling around, and we walked down. We walked down, and we were having dinner. And one thing about being in a band is that usually the facilities at the venues are not particularly nice, and so when you go to a restaurant, it's always nice to take advantage of a warm bathroom or something. And we had eaten dinner, and before we went back to the venue, I went to use the bathroom, and I went into the bathroom. And I was sitting in the toilet. I was in a stall, and I heard somebody come in, and they were just kind of standing there. They weren't running the water, and it was a little bit. I was like, And then I heard somebody else come in and maybe take a pee or something, and then go out. But I still had that sense that the first person was still there. And I was just sitting there, just kind of waiting for them to leave because they were making me uncomfortable. And they walked to the front of the door of where I was sitting. And then below the stall door came a Sharpie and a CD cover. And this voice said, "Would you mind signing my CD?" And I said, "I'm taking a session. This is not appropriate." And the CD retreated, and the footsteps went out the door. And I sat there like, this can't have happened. This couldn't have just happened. So I walked out, and I said, "Did you guys see anybody there?" And Joe actually was a person who had come in and taken a pee, and he said, "Oh yeah, I saw that guy." And I told him what happened. They're like, "That is incredible." They saw him leave. He just come in. He saw us go in the restaurant. He just came in, and I guess he just. I don't know how he worked it, but that was a little. That was not the most comfortable situation. But generally speaking, I'm always perfectly happy to have a word. Or
he could have just waited outside the bathroom.
I mean, yeah, I just felt for the guy. I actually feel bad for him because I know he was just so. I could tell he was so nervous, as he should have been. That's just not. He wasn't thinking well. It wasn't a good. And I imagine somewhere, if he still remembers it, it's not something he's particularly proud of.
Okay. All right.
I'm a pretty nice person, I think. Honestly.
You sound really nice.
I'm pretty easygoing, and I'm almost always happy to have a word with anybody.
Ian, I have to get out for work myself, but Jessica has a few more questions for you. I just wanted to ask one more thing before I left.
Right.
Went and saw Henry Rollins on his capitalism stop in St. Paul just a few weeks ago.
For his capitalism tour?
Yep. Yeah. Great speaker. He's hilarious.
He's
guy.
very good, yeah.
Yeah. But he was telling a story about you two at a particular stadium show. And I can't remember the band. Do you remember, Jessica? Was it?
No, I don't remember.
I want to say it was Aerosmith or something.
It was either by Nugent or Led Zeppelin or one of those.
It was Led Zeppelin. And how you guys were standing next to each other, and there was some guy passed out right next to you just because he was on something a little too hard, and how you guys were just amazed by Led Zeppelin. It was at that moment where you kind of both decided to take care of your bodies better and go throughout that. And I was just wondering if you remember that moment in the same way that Henry did, or if that was just
No, I mean, Henry and I definitely saw some arena gigs for sure, and we saw really people just doing terrible things to themselves. But I mean, I just never was interested in using drugs. My friends started getting high at night when they were 11 years old, so I was. And I just was not interested. I felt it was so boring, and I can remember just saying hey, I'd say let's go build a bike jump or something. They're like, I think we're gonna maybe go try to get high. We're like, oh God, just seemed like all people were gonna do for the rest of their lives, which for many people is exactly what it was. And the same way I felt about it's strange, with drinking. I can remember as a 12 or 13-year-old kid. I mean, I used to think that beer essentially was the mandatory adult soda that you would have to start drinking at 18. It wasn't, it wasn't that you got to drink; it's that you had to drink, and that was it. You just drank for the rest of your life, which is what most people did. And it just struck me, even at that young age, just totally insane. So I just was never interested in it at all. Now I know that Henry and I saw. A number of arena gigs together, and I definitely can remember shows where, there would be some. I remember we were at one show with a friend of ours, and he was kind of a kook, and he found a little baggie on the floor with pills in it, and he's like, "Check it out." And I don't know if you guys have ever had that that experience where you find somebody has illegal drugs, you're like, "Whoa!" I remember just saying "Oh man!" Shit, that's drugs, that's drugs. And then he's like, yeah, we should take them. I was like, I'm not fat. I'm not, I don't know if they had him, but he took them. We still never knew what it was. I mean, I still don't have any idea what what the drugs were. I just don't know. But I thought it was. I guess I just didn't think it was it wasn't the wisest decision to take them. I think for me, if there's like something that really occurred to me in my life that I think was one of the many things that led me to not want to sort of get high or get involved with that world, is that I'm a Jimi Hendrix fan / fanatic. I was obsessed with Jimi Hendrix when I was a kid. And of course, it was very sad that he had died, and that he had died as a result of substance abuse. Of course, didn't make me a fan of drugs, but even more affecting for me was I would meet people in 1974 or 75, 5 years after he's died, and talking to them, I'd find out that they'd seen him play, and almost every one of them had no recollection of seeing him because they were too high. And I remember just thinking, I want to remember everything. I want to remember. And it just seemed to me that getting high was a way of not remembering. So that's why I can speak, at least in my own mind, with some authority about the first time I saw the Bad Brains, or had that conversation with HR, or even about having to being asked to sign a CD booklet while I'm taking a session. I like to think that some level it's because I desired to remember, and I didn't want to do anything that was going to compromise that.
One of my other questions is you kind of already answered, but do you listen to Minor Threat ever and stuff
not out of any kind of. There's so much incredible music in the world, and I just feel that, I think Minor Threat is a great document. I think those songs, they're perfect, and not because I wrote them or because I sang them, but just because of the way they were captured, And it's funny, I'd never, having been in the band, I didn't, in my role in the band as a singer, you got to remember when you're a singer, you tend to be looking away from the band. And it wasn't until about a decade ago when I was making the DVD of the Minor Threat live footage, and I was editing it and putting it together, and I was really studying the band in a way that I had never done. And I realized what phenomenal players Brian and Lyle and Jeff were. Really, totally specific to their craft was incredible, and it was really amazing to have the kind of perspectives I was having at that moment, which is 20 years and just having been in band for so long, but to actually go back and look at this music that it just was before. I don't know if you can follow what I mean by that, but sometimes things just are. You don't really think about what goes into what the ingredients are, and I just was having a moment where I was able to parse the ingredients and just thinking about just really how phenomenal their musicianship is. And of course, I love those songs. I mean, I do. They are constantly, they're in there with me still, and I stand behind all my lyrics. There's no question about any of that. But I think if I was going to listen to something, I'm more likely to listen to Wire's first album, or just stuff that I didn't actually record. It just seemed weird to listen to your own music to me. But but having said that, also the thing to think about is that when we make a record, Amy and I just made a new Evens record. It's coming out in a few weeks, and I have listened to that record thousands of times now. In the actual processing of it, I've heard these songs thousands of times. So by the time the record comes out, I have heard it, and I don't really need to play it again. Not for many years. It doesn't have the same. Its job with me is done in many ways. Now it needs to go out and work with other people. The same way other people's music works with me. But songs, they live. They're living things as long as people play them. And Fugazi always said that the record is the menu, the show is the meal. And our idea of making records was to give people some sense of what was going on in these songs. They could actually have a moment to study them, but then when they saw them live, they could see those things being created in real time. Because songs, when you play, they're being created at that moment. There may be a general program or plan for what everyone's going to play, but the way it happens, the circumstances in which it's happening, the air in the room, these are things that are all conspiring to make something new. And it's not like Waiting Room, for instance. For most people, most everybody, I would say, the definitive version is the one that's on the record. But for me, having played that song literally thousands of times, for real, thousands of times, what do you think the chances are that the greatest version of that song just happened to be the day that we recorded it? The odds are not good. So for me, the definitive version of that song probably happened somewhere entirely remote and weird and a different place altogether. The reason we recorded it was to give people a sense of the possibility.
Right. Do you think that has... Oh, sorry.
That's the way I think you should think about your music, too. Let the songs grow. If you feel like they are constrained by recording, then free them. I mean, we actually... The desire to make music together is innate, right? It just comes. We both want to make music, and we make music together. So that just comes with the territory. Now, there may be, maybe there's things... Obviously, we both listen to a lot of music. I listen to music all the time. So when I write, it's entirely possible that something that I have listened to has given me an idea about how to shove sound around that. But, for most people, I for one, couldn't even put my finger on it, and don't think anybody else would ever notice it either. But surely, when you hear music that inspires you, it's entirely possible that when you're trying to come up with a part, you go, well, here, that's kind of cool. And you might even, I might even say, like, oh, this kind of reminds me of such and such, or whatever. But nobody else in the world would ever hear it that way. Our writing is really, I play the guitars, and I think that, so the melodic component is almost always me, because she doesn't play the guitar. She's a drummer. She can play piano, but she doesn't really write a lot of the melodic stuff. So the original sort of the basis, like the riffs, usually come from me, but then we start shaping them together, and we arrange, and things get edited and changed around, and then she'll write like lyrics for her own song, her own melody, her singing melody. That's all her. So that's sort of so we just try to make things that are interesting for us, something that feels engaging. I think what influences this really is just the desire to create and to create together.
So you guys, when you tour and play shows locally, you like to play in what type of venue?
Well, we don't generally play in bars or clubs. So we try to find venues that are outside of the normal circuits. We have our own PA and our own lights. But, having said that, we haven't actually toured in 5 years.
Right.
So it's been a while for us, and we haven't, that was always our position before, and I think that our idea is that, we got to figure out how to do this. Mom and Dad are in the band at this point, and so, and our kids definitely going to come with us, so we got to, we're going to have to figure it out, but we're going to start with just doing, local gigs and just start getting back to the stage and getting into doing regular gigs, and then widening that circle, going a few hours out of town and then coming back, and then maybe a couple of nights in a row, and just start figuring out how it's going to work, figure out how many people want to see us, what the economy, what the scale of this thing will be, because it's a logistical challenge, how you're going to tour with a 4-year-old. But one that I know is doable. It's just a matter of figuring it out. And my life is my practice in life is creative response. So I look at certain situations or circumstances and try to figure out how best to navigate it and what's the most creative way to do this. And we'll just find out. But I got to lay my hands on it before I know what it feels like. I should say that the reason we don't play bars and clubs is because there was a point in my life where I felt like it didn't feel good to me that to practice my form of expression required me to be in venues where the economy is based on self-destruction, because that's what bars are. And doesn't mean that I think they should be shut down. I don't hate them, nothing like that. It just made me sad that music always gets pushed into that corner. And I just felt, I guess, and for me, the absolute proof of the wrongness of it is the fact that there are many bands that play in venues where people under the age of 21 are not even admitted. And I think everyone would agree that music for a 16-year-old or a 17-year-old or 18-year-old is pretty serious. So the idea that these people, to whom music means so much, would be locked out because they're not old enough to drink, something is deeply, deeply wrong with that equation. Music is for all people, and it should be at all places. And I feel like that there's been a bit of I feel like people have been kind of tricked into thinking that we always have to go to these same places. So since the Evens were a smaller band, and because of the way we were approaching music made it possible, we have decided to try to make it work outside of that circuit. I don't know what will happen if suddenly 1,000 people want to see us every night. That's going to make it much trickier. But if it's 200 or 300, I think we can make it work.
Okay, so in terms of your musical style with the Evens and Fugazi and Minor Threat, what caused you to... I feel like it's been a completely drastic change. I know you've been in other bands besides that as well. But how do you think... or why do you think your style so drastically changed over the progression? Do you think it's because you grew as a person, or you were just... What do you think?
I don't think it's so drastically changed, but that's just me. I don't think that. I think it's all... Actually, I can see a very serious connection between it all. Someone once said, they said about the Evens, they said it's like hearing distilled Fugazi. Like, they could really hear like one like vein clearly of Fugazi. It's just evolution. How old are you?
23.
So think about yourself when you were 10, and think about the way you've changed, and maybe your handwriting, for instance. Everything we learn, goes into things we do, and it's not a deliberate decision on my part to. I didn't think I got to come up with something new, or I don't, or I reject the past. In fact, I've always just tried to make music that was interesting to me, what was happening inside of me musically. And that's what I did in the Teen Idols, that's what I did in Minor Threat, that's what I did in Embrace, that's what I did in Fugazi, that's what I do in the Evens. It's actually what's inside of me. And I see it as all from the same place exactly. It's just that the landscape has changed. Again, think about your world now and your world 10 years ago. I assume that things have changed. Is that a fair assessment?
Yes, absolutely.
So I would imagine if you were writing a song when you were 13, it would sound quite different than the song you might write today.
That is...
But they're coming from the same place. And I've just tried to be honest about it. That's just what... I mean, I can tell you that, for instance, one thing about the Evens, that there was a strategic decision or a strategy in place, which was to play in venues that were not rock clubs. We had to figure out what it was that compelled everyone to go into the rock club. And the thing that we think, one of the factors, was volume. Rock clubs have PAs, they have sound reinforcement, they have a tacit agreement with their neighbors at least. And so bands can bands go there because it's like a it's a safe place for their music. So how could we get out of there? We thought, well, turn down. Don't be so loud. I don't equate power and volume. Sometimes volume is very powerful. Sometimes it's just loud. And for me, in fact, some of the most powerful moments of my life have been in near silence. If you talk to somebody who speaks quietly, you move closer. And I thought, well, why can that work with music too?
Mm-hmm.
We play quieter. Doesn't mean that we're playing less intensely. It just means we're playing quieter. So I think that and the fact that they're different instruments and that we're different, they're different people. And Brian and Lyle and Joe were definitely not Guy and Brendan and Joe are definitely not Lyle, Brian, and Jeff.
Mm-hmm.
They're different people. And Amy's none of the above. So, those, every band is a relationship. And what comes out of that band is a product of the collaboration between the people who are in that relationship, for me.
Right.
But it's all the same music. One thing is that for you, you can listen to it compressed. You can take a minor threat record and an Evans record and put them back to back. I can't because I recorded the minor threat stuff before you were born. It's like so. It's sort of a different. I can see the time. I understand the timeline. I can see the trajectory. So this is. I think it's harder for. And this is the same for me too. Don't get me wrong. Certainly there's been other times where I've wondered, well, how did that person get from here to there? Because when you have a lot of years of work, then someone who comes along, any one of us can come along and just hold the two things next to each other and compare. But it's very hard for the artist to really do. The artist doesn't have to compare because the artist knows that it just happened. It's just what happened.